going to talk about dirt, soil, and I had someone ask me a question about it. So it's easier for me if I show you rather than tell you. Hello, Fiddly Fifiers. Good morning. It is bright and early on Saturday morning, and yes, I am wearing my old lady shawl, and that is because, contrary to that sun you see giving half of my face light, it is about 40 degrees, so I had to throw something on so I would be comfortable. Anyway, today I wanted to answer a question about soil, my soil mix, but as always, I wanted to educate you on a little bit more and give you that little extra information, because you can, maybe you don't want to use my mix, maybe you want to create your own mix. Okay, so I just want to give you that extra information. I apologize, my microphone is not working. This isn't the best quality video, but you're going to get the information, okay? All right, so first of all, the main things that plants need: light, air, warmth, and water. Those are the basics that it needs. However, when you're going to pot it, if you're not going to grow it hydroponically, the soil is the foundation. It's where your plant is going to live, sometimes for many, many years to come, okay? So soil is so important. And the next part that plants need, in addition to those basics, is food. And that food consists of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in different orders, okay? So it's very important that you understand that, because you can also use those elements in the soil, as well as feed it with other things such as fertilizers or top dressings or things of that nature, okay? Let me tell you a little bit about those things. Nitrogen is good for like healthy green growth during the spring and summer months, and you want to kind of back off of nitrogen in the winter. So nitrogen is good for sort of like Brussels sprouts and collard greens, more so than a cucumber, in other words. So nitrogen is going to give you that rich foliage, and that's what that's used for. Phosphorus, on the other hand, helps the roots to grow, and it also helps with flowering and fruit. So, you know, if you have a fruit tree, the flower comes first and then the fruit. So the phosphorus is really good to make those roots really strong and to make solid, delicious fruits, okay, and beautiful flowers. All right, so you can select the right fertilizer depending on the plant and depending on what you need, and you can add that to the soil. What I'm going to do today is a basic potting mix that I generally use for most of my plants, and then I will just add different things depending on the specific species, okay? So let's just be clear. This is not going to be forever, but right now I'm on a budget, just like most of you. And so I shop the Walmarts, the Home Depots, the Costco's, the Ollie's, the different local stores that we have here, and I try to do the best I can on a dime. All right, so I'm not sponsored by any of the products I used. No one's giving me a check to advertise them. I'm just telling you what I use because it's easily accessible. I can get it right down the street and I can use it on my plants. All right, so because I'm on this budget life, how I start to make my soil, I use different, these are all Miracle-Gro brands. So I have here just a seed starting potting mix. I have a cactus and palm mix. That is for, that's a well draining mix. I also have some perlite. And before we go on, let me just show you before I open these unopened bags. One of our Fiddly Fifi members showed me this really cute trick. Once you cut the top off the bag, or you can actually rip it, they're pretty easy to rip. She saves these, and that's how she ties her bag up again. So I'm just giving you that little tip because I didn't know about that. I was here using these clips for mine. So that was great that she taught me that. We have perlite here, and I'll explain all of these coming up, and I have a little bit of orchid bark. I have some compost that I already put into a bowl. You can find this anywhere. You know, you'll see the compost. Usually in my Home Depot, Lowe's, or whatever, the compost is really inexpensive for a very large bag. And because I know I'm gonna mix it, I don't mind going ahead and getting that large bag because I don't want to use it solely, but I know I'm gonna mix it down, so that lasts me quite a while. All right, so especially when I have so much to repot all the time, and I use a lot of soil. Like this is one of, you can't really see the whole thing, but this is a pretty large seed starter for me, so I use a lot of soil for that, okay? Something just fell. All right, so how I mix mine, let me tell you just the basics, okay? Perlite helps drainage, okay? Perlite is actually volcanic rock. So as you can see, this is how perlite looks. It's like these little white, looks like beads, and it feels like styrofoam, okay? But it's actually volcanic rock. And adding this to your soil will help the water drain out. When we talk about drainage, it's because if water sits in this soil, I'm going to show you, I should have dropped that perlite in there, but I'm going to show you this soil. Let me walk over here. Okay, so I'm sure you can see that soil, and when I smush that soil, it doesn't fall apart. It's very thick and clumpy. It will clump together. That's not what we want. That means that there's, and I'm squeezing this right now, and there's water coming out of it. Okay, is because that water will sit there around those roots, and then those roots will acquire bacteria, and they will begin to rot and kill your plant. Of course, roots are everything. So I don't use potting mix or compost alone. When you add these things to the soil, like the perlite, it will help that water drain out quickly because it's not just that tight compost. So let me show you really quick. That's just the plain compost that I was showing you. Again, you see how it's even in like a muddy rock sort of. This is not what you want for your plants, not for house plants especially. Okay, so here is some of the compost that I added perlite to. Okay, it just has some of the perlite. I don't know if you can see that. I'm trying to make a good video today. Anyway, so it has some of the perlite. Now you can see, even though I squish it, it's still just falling out of my hand. It's not going to be stuck and wet and hold that water. So this is why you want to add things like perlite to your soil, to amend the soil, to make it more well draining. Is that the right way to say it? I think so. All right, what else do I have here? I did have some peat moss. Hang on, let me grab it. So I have here also some peat moss. It's not a guy named Pete. It's actually P-E-A-T. I don't know if we can get this off so I can show you. I should have used Lorna's trick. Anyway, I have a, what do you call these things? A zip tie on here. Which in hindsight was good because I leave these outside, but not for a video. Anyway. Alright, so this is peat moss. Peat moss has a lot of negative press. I don't use it alone. I will use it as a soil amendment. But it's actually old sphagnum moss, okay? And for containers, it's not so bad if you mix it with something, but not alone. The last thing, well, I have two more things. I have here worm castings. I'm making too much noise while I'm talking. I have here worm castings. Worm casting is basically like worm poop with a couple of things in it. So this is worm poop, which is amazing. If you could have worms in your bed, I love sticking worms in my veggie beds and in my flower beds because worms poop in there, and that poop is a great fertilizer, okay? So again, this is basically worm poop. You cannot, according to the things I've read, you cannot overuse it. You cannot use too much. And even if you use this as an amendment to your soil, you can also still fertilize during the spring and summer months, okay? You can still fertilize even though you might have some worm castings there. So I love worm castings, okay? So here we go with my basic soil mix. So I have this premix, but it's only a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I take some of this compost. My mix is going to be 40% compost, 40% perlite, and about 20% worm castings. Now, if I have a plant that needs to retain moisture, my wandering Jew, some of the calatheas, some of my alocasias, they need to retain a little moisture. If I need to retain a little more moisture, then I will go ahead and I will add a little bit of the peat to it. But I don't use that as a general rule. So my very basic soil is this compost, Okay, and I know how much compost we have there, so I'm going to take my perlite and I'm going to add my perlite to that, about the same amount. So it's not half and half because we're also doing worm castings, but if you didn't have the worm castings, it would be half perlite and half compost, okay? And I just want to make sure, you can use your fingers, I'm trying not to today, but you just want to thoroughly mix that. I hope you guys can hear me because my microphone broke today. And it's so pretty outside, but it's so cold. Uh-oh, I'm making a mess. Okay, so now, let me let you see it. We have that compost that was sticking together. Remember, it was sticking together earlier. And now, because I added that perlite to it, look at that. Even though I squeeze it, I'm not getting those little clumpy lumps and balls anymore, okay? So I did that about 50-50. I think it could use a little more. Today. And I was planning on gardening all morning. I might just put on my little sweatpants but I don't like gardening with clothes on. I like to have my tank top and whatever, but not today, honey, not today. So you just want to mix it until it's well mixed and not have any of those clumps. See, there's one clump in here, so I'm continuing to mix, which, you know, you'll probably do really quickly. And I would suggest, this is me, I would suggest you create your soil, enough soil that you're going to use at the time. You don't want to create a whole soil mix and leave it to the side. I mean, that's up to you, but I don't like to do that. If I know I'm going to plant something, I know I'm going to use it, I'll go ahead and plant and create enough for the plants I'm going to use, or the plants I'm going to pot. Okay? Now, one other bag that you didn't see, but I have here, this little pink bag, is orchid bark. And of course, this is the stuff you see in orchids that they don't, it's basically kind of like no soil. This is basically wood chips, okay? So let me see if I can show you those. It's basically like little wood chips. I hope you can see that. So these wood chips I use sort of like a mulch, like on the top of my plants sometimes. Not all of them, but like my plants that I sit in a big planter and they're on the floor. When you look in there, you don't want to see that ugly. So I'll use that. Or sometimes I use rocks, or they have these really pretty sort of crystal looking rocks at Dollar Tree. And they have a wide selection. Not the sand, but you can use some of the rocks. Make sure that you clean them thoroughly before you put those on your plant. Okay, so two ways you can use the worm castings. You can go ahead and include it in your mix like I do. So I'm gonna eyeball it. So I know I have half and half, so I'm only gonna do about 20% of this. So it's not much. Now what you can also do with worm castings, if you take a little bit, just like I'm doing here, you can put that, you know, on the top level of your soil. Make sure you water it thoroughly. Like if you're not repotting, you can also do that. And then I'm just gonna mix this in because I don't want the worm castings too far down. I want them basically kind of at the top of the soil. And so now we have a mix that has not only a well-draining mix, but we have a mix that has a little bit of food in it. So what plant wouldn't love this? This is great. So now I know when water goes through here, it's just gonna go through. Now let me tell you a little bit about this cactus mix. This is already pre-mixed and it's specifically for cactus, palms and things like that. I like using this because it is super well draining. But the danger of this is that it is super well draining. It has like sand, coarse sand and things like that. So the water will go straight through. Sometimes the plants don't get enough water. So remember, you might water more when you're using this because it's not gonna hold any water. The water is just gonna pass right through. So the roots have to grab it wherever. So sometimes I bottom water. If you don't know what that is, whatever tray you have underneath your pot, you can water from the bottom and allow the roots to suck in whatever they need. And then whatever's left over after about 30 minutes, an hour, you go and clean that up. Sometimes this is too well draining and it will create a situation where you have to water more. In this situation, sometimes I will add a little bit of peat to this if I just really want to use this cactus mix. The last bag I have here is a seed starting mix. And this is specially formulated for like seedlings or if you're going to start seeds. Okay, these are for the little shallow containers. This is not something that you want to put a plant in, a mature plant in. Okay, so you're just going to put this in the pot. You can take a stick, or you know, my favorite thing is to buy chopsticks. I think you can buy a pack of chopsticks, like 40 chopsticks for $2 or something like that. And you can have those things forever. But anyway, you're just going to sit it in a container just like it's pictured there. And you'll just put your seedling right in there. And you're sealing the roots, because the way this is, it is, let me show you. Let me just show you. See how easy that ripped out? So it's really, really light and airy. Even so, more so, and you probably have seen this. Let me come a little bit closer. You've probably seen this before. It's super light and super airy. And so for a new seedling, the roots will be able to pass through and spread really quickly. So that's what it's for. It does even have some perlite potting mix. There. My basic potting mix is compost, 40% perlite, 40%, 20% worm castings. And I just gave you some ideas for some additives to amend your soil so your soil will be better for your specific plant. Oh my gosh, I think I got dirt in my eye. Okay, I really did get dirt in my eye. Oh my God, help me, Jesus. Help me. And I hope this video helps somebody today. And I hope you have a wonderful day. And I love you guys. And come on, get in the dirt and let's get growing.